Hello friends, and welcome back to Shelley Skylines BrizVegas. And it's a new year, new suburb, because in today's episode, we're looking at the inner west and the suburb of Milton. Nestled along the northern banks of the Brisbane River, Milton's story of European settlement begins like most of the inner city suburbs in the mid-1800s, when settlers from merry old England sought new opportunities in this growing colony. Some of Milton's early pioneers arrived aboard the Fortitude in 1849, and it was John Lang who hand-selected all the passengers aboard, wanting to bring more suitable colonists to the emerging Brisbane town. One of these chaps was Robert Cribb, a merchant who ran a bakery on Queen and Albert Street in the CBD, and was one of the first land buyers in Milton, with Cribb Street in Milton still bearing his name today. And speaking of names, the actual name of Milton came from another European settler named Ambrose Eldridge, a chemist and entrepreneur who was also keen to develop some farmland in the area along the riverbank. Focusing on cotton mostly, he named this spot Milton Farm, after the English poet John Milton. He also built the first substantial house in the area, named, of course, Milton House. And this name would eventually extend to the entire suburb, with the house still standing to this day. And back to John Lang.
Hello there.
Most Australians would be familiar with Lang Park, also known as Suncorp Stadium, or the Cauldron. The naming of Lang Park is tied to Lang's contributions to the development of the area and his broader impact on the state of Queensland. What you may not know is this was originally the site for the North Brisbane Burial Grounds, sometimes referred to as the Paddington Cemetery. We've spoken about some of the burial grounds before, with the oldest one still hovering nearby on Skew Street. But this one was the second burial ground selected once the original one was running out of space, and it was in use around the 1840s, when the much larger Toowong Cemetery down the road became the primary resting place for most folks in Brisbane at this time. The area left behind fell into a bit of disrepute until it was decided to be redeveloped into more of a recreational reserve in 1911. However, there was just a little issue that needed to be dealt with first: relocating all the graves. It was difficult to find exact statistics on this exercise, but from my research it seems like as little as 5 to 10% of the bodies were actually relocated at this time, mostly to the Toowong Cemetery, but this leaves about 90% or more of the graves behind, despite the council assuring the public that everyone had been relocated and all was well. Until 1928, and it was reported in the Courier Mail that workmen who have been making a sewer trench across Lang Park have been digging up coffins and skulls and human remains. The council and health department claimed to have resolved this again until another similar incident in 1934. Portions of human skeletons and the crumbling remains of coffins have been discovered by relief workers, engaged in levelling a small rise alongside the oval in Lang Park, Paddington. Fast forward to as recent as 2001, and as part of the redevelopment of the now Suncorp Stadium, a further 397 burials were excavated from the site prior to the stadium's expansion, many of which were interred again at Toowong Cemetery. However, some still also remain at the church that was adjacent to the cemetery, which I never even knew was still here on the stadium grounds. Known as Christ Church and built in 1891, this building is heritage listed and you can still see some of the remaining tombstones here. Just imagine how haunted this place must be after all of this disruption over the last century or so. Next door to the stadium, we have the XXXX Brewery in Milton. More than just a factory, it's a Queensland institution. Established in 1878, the brewery has been pumping out the iconic golden lager that Queenslanders hold close to their hearts, and their eskies. The name 4X is said to signify quality, as back in the day, brewers would mark barrels with X's to indicate strength, but the locals like to joke that it's because Queenslanders can't spell beer. Located along Milton Road, the brewery's towering red brick facade and the massive 4X sign are as iconic as the noticeable aroma of brewing hops that constantly wafts across the suburb. The factory is now heritage listed, but they are actually still brewing beer here, making it one of the oldest still operating factories in all of Brisbane. Speaking of heritage listings, this two-storied stone residence was constructed in 1868 for Edward Tufnell, the first Anglican Bishop of Brisbane. It went on to be used as the St. Francis Theological College, and still used that way today. Then we have Cook Terrace, also along one of the main roads here, Coronation Drive. a beautiful block of flats built around 1888, now mostly used for businesses along this very busy thoroughfare. The Milton State School, originally known as the Rosalie State School, opened with an enrollment of 261 students on the 18th of March 1889. And even this this tree was planted more than 120 years ago and should apparently go on to live another 100 years provided it is not damaged by a natural disaster or beset by disease. And I love that it's just chillin' right here in the middle of this roundabout. So some very interesting history going on here, from its humble beginnings as farmland on the banks of the Brisbane River, as well as some iconic BrizVegas landmarks. It's a place where stories of the past still linger, sometimes quite literally beneath our feet. And I'm super excited to get into this build today and start fleshing out some of the inner west. So let's get into it. Alrighty, so here we are in Milton, and you can see some of the existing road connections we have here from some of our previous builds, including these two here, which take you across the river to West End. So one of them is actually a rail bridge, and the other one is called the Go-Between Bridge. Best name for a bridge ever, because it's a bridge, and you can use either side to go between. Genius. But it's actually named after a classic band from Brisbane called the Go-Betweens. And then we've also got this other existing rail connection coming over from in the city way along with Milton Road, the main road running through Milton. Now I've left all the rest empty so far because the Suncorp Stadium is right smack bang here. And experience tells me that if I go and build all the roads, I will no doubt not have room for this and eventually need to rebuild it. Look at us learning from our mistakes in 2025. So definitely going to get this in first. And after some experimentation, I think we're going to custom build this. If we use this American football field doodah thingy, we can surround it with these stadium seat things, and it will let us get that pretty distinctive rectangle shape. And we also need room for the church, still out the front there. And we have a new asset for this from the UK pack. Finally a church, and it's got a cemetery already. A bit bigger than the one we need, but I think that's pretty sweet. Alright, sounds like a plan. Let's go. Well, I think that looks pretty good actually, and we didn't even have to dig up any dead bodies during the construction. I still think it is so wild that there's likely a 150-year-old grave still living under this place. Anyway, this little bump in the terrain caused by the church here is really bugging me. There's a walkway that comes out of the stadium here, and if we put down the surface, it's only going to accentuate it. So let's fix that. And moving it to face the other roadside seems to do the trick. Still got a massive hill thing here, but we can hide that with some fine shrubbery. So this little entranceway here is pretty cute. Technically there should be a walkway from the railway bridge over here, but I messed around a bit with that and it just didn't work properly. So we'll just decorate this to look as close to the real thing as we can. And now we can draw the road that surrounds this here and links up to the main road. So I don't know why I put these trees here yet, but let's see how the road fits first. So cute. I love how this turned out actually. And it's customary to head over to the Caxton after a game to have a beer or start a fight or something. So it's all very realistic, isn't it? Love it. Speaking of beer, let's move along the road here to this little section of Milton Road. I remember this so vividly in my mind. I think because of how many times I've been stuck in traffic in this spot staring at it. But this little trio of things here being the McDonald's, the BP, and the brewery, all in a little line. This visual is just so burned into my brain for some reason, so I'm excited to finally build this. First on the corner here is just some regular commercials, so let's get that out of the way. Now for these other three things. Actually, first I'll do some translating for my foreign friends. So McDonald's equals Macca's, service station equals servo, and beer equals
Bay.
Congratulations, you can now officially speak Australian. Now for the Maccas, we'll definitely use the Retro Diner. And I've had these McDonald's decals sitting in my inventory for a while now without getting any use. So I'm excited to try these out. So we'll just put that there and then we'll use the one-stop station for the servo. And for the brewery, I think I'm going to use the paper factory. It seems to be the most lifelike to the real thing. It is just a little bit larger than it should be, but who cares? I'm the bloody mayor. And now just looking at this from back here, yes, it's doing what I want it to do. I can see the vision. Now for these Macca's decals, we certainly have plenty to choose from. I might just do a bit of branding around the outside with the classic golden arches. Whoops, some of them not working. What I did not realize is there are decals to mimic the bloody shop front. Wow, that is so freaking cool. Instant Mac attack. I'm loving it. Oh yes, and around this side we can use the whole words. This is so good. And whack another shop front on there and I'm totally convinced. Now for the servo, we got to make it green, of course. That's all we really need to do with this one and it looks pretty good to me. And I might just leave the brewery customization for a moment. So let's finish off some of the finer details now around the Maccas and the servo. Alright, well we've got just a few complaints already about needing workers. The good thing is all behind here is very residential. It's a mixture of those Queenslander type houses, some standard low set houses, a few small apartment buildings, and a few fancier mansion places. So we'll get a good mix of lot sizes around the place. So satisfying. Now next door to the brewery, we have that old Bishopsbourne building. I was thinking of using the cemetery temple for this. If you remember in my Sleepy Hollow video, this building is just so dang cool, especially at nighttime, and especially when it's in a spooky cemetery. But it has those arch-like windows that look exactly like the old Bishopsbourne building. And after a bit of recoloring, I think that looks pretty sweet. So around this place, there's a few other classroom type buildings. So this might be a good excuse to use some more things from the new UK pack. Like this school seems to fit in nicely. And actually, I've just spotted on the map that behind the Bishopsbourne, there's a community garden type situation. And you know, given this suburb was pretty much farmland in the beginning, this could be a good opportunity to give that little nod back to the past. So let's add in a little bit of farm zoning here. Why the heck not? And then a couple of little dorms around to the right and some houses to the left. And a couple of shops at the front should fill this space out nicely. Very nice, and gosh, I just love having some new assets. Such nice additions. Before we start expanding too much further, I think we better customize the brewery just a little bit. The obvious thing here is needing to get those iconic 4X's on the side of the building and on this chimney here. It looks like that will be pretty straightforward as we can use the Tygon letter decals, which I didn't think used to snap upright like this. But they are now. Wonderful. Maybe soon we'll be able to recolor them too, to make them red. But for now, I'm just happy to at least have them on here. What would be really sweet is if we could get some 4X branding going on up in here. Actually, this little 4X man is so iconic, and fun fact, my dad even has a tattoo of him on his chest. Can you get any more Queenslander than that? I don't think so. Anyway, maybe we'll just remove this other branding for now, and actually, maybe bringing some bright yellow color here to the factory might help. Because yeah, using other decals, it just doesn't feel right unless it says 4X. Okay, that will have to do. So back next to Bishopbourne, we're almost reaching the perimeter of the suburb over here now. But along here we have a few parks and that famous old fig tree too. And actually along the front here are some tennis courts, part of what was the Milton Tennis Centre. It's now known as Frew Park, but this place was in operation as one of Australia's primary tennis venues since 1915. And fun fact, the first ever Australian Open was actually played here back in 1969. And I guess before there were other big venues like the Brisbane Entertainment Centre, it also hosted a bunch of huge concerts for the likes of the Rolling Stones and Elton John. Cool. So it has since been transformed and rebranded as Frew Park, but still a bit of the tennis courts going on as a nod back to this past. And I know these are basketball courts, but I just really wanted them to be blue, so we're going with these. And then we can add in this path creating the park area. Now I can't remember what patch these new parks came out in, but I am just loving all of these new little mini parks. They take up just a square or two and they really help to fill out little gaps around the neighbourhoods. So coming off this road here are a few different roads with the roundabout in the centre. And this is where our grand old fig tree lives. And yet again, I am faced with the problem that these trees just still are not big enough when you want to put in some big old massive tree. So I'm going to do the funkadelic trick to just stack a bunch of oaks on top of each other. Up close, it definitely looks a bit silly, honestly, but I want to make sure that this tree is noticeable from above and standing out from afar. And yeah, I reckon that looks pretty alright. Definitely stands out here. Now just a few pathways to help people get through the park and then a couple more houses to fill out this block. Just nearby the fig tree here, we have the Milton State School. And I think the standard elementary school is going to be great for this. I just love that buttery yellow colour of the building. We also seem to have a bit of a soccer field behind, which, looking at the standard one, it's pretty damn big. So I might just use a decal for this instead. Now it's time to jump on the other side of the suburb here between Milton Road and Coronation Drive. As you can see, the Coronation Drive is the main road that comes around from the CBD here. So it's still really got those quite dense office spaces and commercial and whatnot down here. It is funny to think about this being farmland back in the day. And actually this first part here is where Cribb Street and Little Cribb Street is, named after old mate Robert Cribb.
Why hello there.
Unfortunately, his residence is not standing here anymore, but it has been turned into this quite lush and green office park situation called Milton Green. So I'll see if we can get a couple of signature buildings around here and a few more high rises as well. And we've already got some poor homeless folks living in the tennis court. Man, this is still such a big issue in BrizVegas. Sorry guys. You know, I probably don't have any welfare officers around here really. Maybe that will help. And whoa, I clearly have not been in here for a while. There's a few more new assets that have come in. These will come in handy in a moment. But first, I think we'll whack in the Milton train station, which sits here right along Milton Road. So nice that we have some smaller train assets these days. And then opposite the station off the back of Coronation Drive is where we find Milton House. So I think this new French City Hall that I just spotted is going to do quite nicely for this. And then we may as well try to get in an actual welfare office around here as well. And then I notice it's mostly just some hotels and motels near the station. Next to Milton House, there's this funkadelic bunch of commercial office building things. Despite our ongoing issues around lack of customers and whatnot, I think I'm going to put the activity plazas here in a bit of a formation to achieve a similar cool shape. Now for Milton House, I can see in the modern day photo that it has a couple of jacarandas out the front. I actually got this new foliage pack on Paradox Mods, which has expanded our fine shrubbery inventory options just a little bit. But luckily it includes these lovely jacaranda trees and a few other more brightly coloured shrubs. Love it. Ah, so quaint. And just behind here is where we find our Cook Terrace row houses. We've mentioned this in the Petrie Terrace video, but this terrace style house is actually quite rare in Brisbane. So it's very nice to see that these have been retained. I'm fairly sure that back in the day they were used as residential, but these days they seem to only really be used for commercial purposes. Which makes sense given the current makeup of Coronation Drive today. For these, we can use some of the new French row houses. So chic. And ideally they would have some cute little staircase out the front. But what I might do instead is offset them a bit back from the road and then mimic these little gardens that they have out the front. And as predicted, lots of complaints about workers and shoppers. I'm sure this will balance out at some point, but I think it's worth it because Milton is coming along so nicely. The ground pollution from the brewery, they still seem happy though. So ignoring that, we actually just have one more final grand touch to make this all a bit more complete. I want to get in the bikeway, which runs all the way from the city over to Milton along the riverbank. And in the absence of actual bikes, I guess a pedestrian path. But still, this is really going to finish off this area and give the Sims a lovely scenic way to get around the city. It also links up to the Milton City Cat stop here too. So another good mode of transportation for our fine Milton residents. So some terraforming along the bank for the path to fit in, and then I forgot to record laying down the actual path, but you can see it runs all the way around here. And what we'll do now is just gently keyify some of it along here. Just ever so gently to avoid flooding. And then, some gravity-defying deer slowly descending into the river. Hello, chaps. So for this little portion of the riverbank here, it's mostly just trees and things, but also along the waterline there are a bunch of rocks and stuff. Now, I love the way boulders look lining these edges, but it is just so goddamn frustrating laying them down one by one. And if you use the multiple tool thing, it ends up spraying them all over the road in places that I don't want it to go. So for this, I'm trialing using the new line tool updates with these boulders. And I think this was a really good happy medium because it loaded it up with boulders, but with none of the mess. Definitely recommend this if you need to get a similar effect. And with that final boulder, our new addition to BrizVegas is complete. So good to finally get some of our inner western suburbs built. And some very important upgrades to our riverfront as well. And if you made it this far, you may as well subscribe. You can consider it your good deed for the day. But for now, I'll catch you in the next one. Okay, thanks, bye.